And my guests this morning are seated, and I'll introduce them. My guests this morning are Yao Opong. He's a lawyer and teaches law at the Faculty of Law of the Central University. Kwame Jantwa is also a lawyer. He's a senior member of the Convention People's Party. He's a vice chairman of the Public Interest Accountability Committee and commissioner at the NDPC. Alhaji Inus Hussaini is MP for Tamale Central and former Minister Roads and Highways. He will be with us shortly. And also in the studio now is Mustafa Abdul Hamid, presidential spokesperson and minister designate for information. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning,
and welcome
Sam.
to Newsfile.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Good to be here.
Good to have you too. Now, on our very first edition for the year 2017, and we are first dealing with the matter of President John Mahama's Bungalow. We're talking about number 3 Prestige Link and the associated offices that he sought for himself, requested. What happened? We are going to look into that issue in detail. But let's start by listening to what we were treated to, leading to all of the discussions about the president's Bungalow issue. We hear from Kojo Opong Nkrumah, who spoke for the transition team. We hear from Dr. Edward Omane Boama, who wrote or spoke for the president, and we'll hear from Yao Osafo-Maafo, who also was with the presidential transition team and is now the senior minister designate. Let's listen to them and then come back to the studio and discuss the issue.
Talks about a conversation, and that following that conversation, the former president would like to state that he wishes to have, with great respect, that is a request.
Absolutely.
Now, that request was made when that request was made, it has been, and again with respect, there are no timelines as to when this must be decided and responded to. Those discussions have been going on, and as I'm saying to you, those discussions have been going on in the interest of the country. We have sought to do this very magnanimously, even in parts where we are unhappy with some things. We've been very magnanimous and gentle about it because we do not want to create unnecessary tension as part of this transition.
Right.
And as soon as possible, a decision will be communicated, a decision on this request. So my only intention is to make this correction. There is no such agreement. There is a request, as you have rightly read, and that request will be responded to.
Are you privy to what was agreed between, or the conversation between Osafo-Maafo and Julius Deborah, as is referenced in that request letter?
Yes, the request is what is stated in the letter.
So it was just a formal expression of the conversation that was had?
That is what is contained in this letter.
Let me quickly also get back to the fact that the spokesperson of the transition team has spoken. I also spoke to the head of the former government side of the transition team. And so I'm saying that perhaps going forward, it will be important for us and for you to engage the two leaders of the transition team to appreciate exactly what had happened. And if you had a combined effect of this letter, which I'm giving you the reference number, and I've already given, how even the preamble to this letter came about, you will have a better appreciation of the processes that I took place.
Okay.
All I'm saying is, if there has been a change of mind, why not? The only thing that does not change is God.
Okay. Is it true?
A change of mind, let that be communicated. And I believe the necessary steps will be taken.
Okay. Dr. Maniwaba, is it true that the former president had initially wanted to buy the property?
It's absolutely false.
Indeed, the chief of staff of the outgone government discussed this with me and followed it up with a letter. It was a request that His Excellency the President would want to have where he lives now as his retiring benefit, as it were. In fact, his own committee he set up did not recommend that. So go back to that report. And therefore, I referred the whole matter to the legal unit within our transition team. And I've received the results of the legal comments. We have not, and I want to repeat, we have received a request. And the requests are two. One, for him to be given as his ex-gratia the house where he lives. And two, to also be given another property as his office. We are yet to make a decision on the matter because we have to meet and discuss. We haven't discussed it as a team. But we are holding the request and it will be discussed and His Excellency, the former president, will be notified accordingly.
What do you make of the outgone administration's posture that indeed an agreement has been reached and that you're trying to, if you like, put the ex-president in a bad light?
I'm so disappointed with this. Agreement was reached with whom? That's the question. Arrangement must be reached between two people. The question is, the arrangement was reached with whom? If arrangements were reached, why would I go and refer to the legal department for a legal opinion? And therefore, no arrangement has been reached. I can say that with full confidence. The request was made, it was confirmed in writing, and we are yet to react to the request. That doesn't constitute agreement.
Right. You're welcome back. And you had Kojo Opon Kroma, you had Dr. Manebwama, and you had Yao Safuma for Senior Minister Designate. Now, the Honorable Inus of Husseini just joined us. Thank you very much for joining us, Honorable.
Thank you.
Good to have you. I think I'd like to start with you on this issue, deal with you and Mustafa Hamid briefly before we come to the guest on the table. What exactly happened? The Professor Wandel Committee proposed and recommended 40% of the salary of the president as rent allowance. And we understood that initially that's what had been approved. And then subsequently, as Chairman Sabunsu tells us, there was some, some sort of overtures made to the MPs. And then you went back quietly in the dark of night, approved a different thing altogether.
Well, thank you so very much for this opportunity to be part of this panel, and Happy New Year to you and your listeners. Let me also take opportunity to congratulate Nana Akufo-Addo on his recent electoral victory. I mean, this is the first time I've had a platform to do that, and to wish him well in government, and also to thank and congratulate the former president for a smooth transition. I mean, and he being part of the transition process all through, and we hope that the coming events will show clearly, I mean, whether or not we're going to progress or retard in progress. I mean, because these are times of hard choices. Ghanaians had the opportunity to make a choice. They did that on the 7th day of December. Nana Akufo-Addo, the president, is faced with hard choices. He's making his choices. I mean, these are hard times, and so clearly we have to wish him well in government. Coming back to the Bungalow issue. Yeah, first of all, the Bungalow issue appears to be a moot matter. Not so. The president has written to reject or withdraw, or if you like, decline to pursue the matter of where he lives, especially the number 3 Prestige link. And he's also rejected in the same letter that he communicated to the transition team and the government the bungalow that he sought to use as his office. So it appears to be a moot matter. But for the guidance of future engagements with any government, we can proceed to discuss.
There was an agreement, tentatively. Agreements are not, also from how you know that agreements are not only written, oral agreements. And our democracy is young, so we're building conventions around the agreements. I am aware that the president had opportunity to meet with the president-elect before he was sworn in to discuss matters concerning the nation and the transition process. They met somewhere far away and before a very renowned person, and then in conversations that were lively and candid, the president-elect asked the president where he would like to stay. The president indicated that, well, he was desirous of continuing to live where he wanted. And so the president-elect then, now President Nana Akufo-Addo, said that was fine with him because without the, if he had declined to live where he's living, then the government would have been compelled to put up a place for him. And so that will save government some money, and so they could just allocate that place to him. And now the matter has come up that that agreement, oral as it was, is not binding on the transition team and it's not binding on government. And so probably was not made in good faith. And so the president thinks that in order to extricate himself from all these difficulties, he ought to decline and withdraw his request. Because when the agreement was made, or was reached in oral as it were, the process to formalize the agreement was then requested. And so the president directed the chief of staff to put it in a letter addressed to the transition team for their consideration. That's how the request came. The request was consequent upon an earlier agreement. And so, well, if the now saying there was no agreement, well, the president has said that, well, he's not interested. But it's a convention in this country that, starting from former President Rawlings, that where the president retires from office is given a place of residence.
No, but finish that point. A request to an agreement?
The formalization of an agreement.
A formalization of an agreement in which you are making a request.
Because that formalization, that request is to formalize whatever agreement was arrived at that meeting.
Why don't you write the letter differently? Pursuant to the agreement.
Well, but probably they didn't want to refer to that meeting. It's because of what has happened. That is, we are now knowing of that meeting. The president could have engaged. I mean, the presidents meet severally and differently. I mean, so it's because this thing has come up. That's why we have now been asked for further and better particulars. How come that a request was put? I mean, did you just on your own decide to put in a request for the property? Yeah, so in order to formalize what was, what was arrived at that meeting, a request to put in a request for the bungalow was made. And then the president directed his chief of staff to pursue it. Like I said, legally, you will say that, well, why will an agreement not be enforced immediately? Well, this is a country of laws. And this is a country which has transitional teams. And this is a country that clearly we ought to follow the rule of law. I mean, you cannot just sit in 3 of you or 4 of you, sit down and decide what to do with a whole former president. And so I think that was the basis upon which the request was made, that the president put his requests to live in the place, the 3 prestige lane in writing.
Briefly about what Parliament did, which you are going to get to, where you wanted to give us the antecedents of President Rawlings and all. He says there was an agreement. Safumafu says there was none.
Well, first of all, this is a country of laws, and we operate basically a rule of law. So first of all, it is not in anybody's capacity to meet and agree on anything that is not in consonance with law. And at that time that they refer to an agreement, the operational principle for a retiring president's accommodation per the Professor Dora Edubwando committee was for the former president to be given 40% of his salary for rent accommodation. There was no provision for a president to be given an accommodation in the first place. So for anybody to have met to agree on an accommodation for the former president was in violation of law. And I am not a lawyer, but I will guess that any agreement that violates law is void ab initio. I'm assuming, I don't know whether that is true for a fact, but I will assume that any agreement that violates fundamental law is void. And therefore, you cannot...
Void ab initio means as if it never existed.
It never existed because there is no basis for its existence because it violates law. So for them to be referring to an agreement that violates law really beats my imagination. So that agreement did not exist. Now, secondly, when they made that request in writing per the letter of the Chief of Staff, which is what I'm holding, Residence and Office for His Excellency President John Dramani Mahama, reference to our, and they put our in brackets, Osafo Mafu stroke Deborah, reference to our discussion of 19th December on the above subject, we wish to indicate that His Excellency John Dramani Mahama would like to have Bungalow number blah 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 and its adjoining facilities as his official retirement home. As you indicated in your submission, this letter of request does not make reference to an earlier agreement. I will guess it is because they recognize themselves that that agreement was void.
They refer to discussion
between Osafo Mafu and Deborah.
Okay.
That's what is here. So they don't refer to a discussion between the former president and the current president. Because
as he suggested an agreement between them with an eminent person.
Eminent person.
Whom we have come to now know is Otumfuo II.
Okay. So they themselves recognize that any such discussion was void. And therefore, that is why they were careful not to refer to it. Now, when this letter came to our side of the transition team, we then referred it to our legal and governance subcommittee. And this is the advice that Mrs. Gloria Akufu gave to our transition side. And she simply said that having examined the relevant law on the matter, including Article 71, Clause 2 of the 1992 Constitution, and the Edubwando Committee report as approved by Parliament on 28 December 2016, I do not find a constitutional or other lawful basis to grant the request of His Excellency President Mahama to be allowed to retain Bungalow number 3 in retirement. So Gloria Akufu was clear in her mind that this request couldn't hold on the face of law. And therefore, it beats my imagination why now they are trying very hard to reference an agreement that gave him the bungalow. Now, having said all that,
in this letter, when she was referring in the advice, yes, when she was referring to the Professor Bando committee recommendation, yes, as approved by Parliament, was she referring to the approval that varied the recommendation for 40% of the salary?
No, at the time that she was submitting this report, Parliament had not gone to vary the 40% rent matter. So she was referring to the original Edubwando report as approved by Parliament, and said on the face of that report that the president did not qualify to have that bungalow. Now, having said all of that, you are lawyers and you have often said to our hearing that those who come to whatever, something, equity must come with clean hands. President Mahama is not the first former president. We have a former president, Kufuor, who is alive and kicking, and who for 8 years has been entitled to a retirement home. To this day, as we have this conversation, nobody has given him that retirement home. They couldn't be bothered for 8 years.
We understand the project is ongoing.
They, just at the close of their tenure, they say they have acquired a plot of land on which that building will be put up. Now they are not even there to put up that building.
Okay, I wanted you to address the question of the agreement.
But I'm saying, yes, I'm coming. Because it's important. You see, morality and ethics are important components of government, or ought to be important components of government. Otherwise, all of the foundations of our law would collapse. And therefore, the principle of equity, fairness, justice are important for national governance. And I'm saying that to be unfair to a former president like that and to seek to jumpstart him to acquire a home for yourself when somebody who's been out for 8 years has not been catered for, really would have insulted the moral
Okay, you were to
justice
confirm whether
of
there
our
was the
country.
agreement he suggested or not, but you have gone beyond that. That's fine, though. But isn't it curious that Mr. Safi Mafu refers to the fact that it was something under consideration, a request under consideration, and that it's been referred to the legal subcommittee, and as you say, Gloria Kufu headed that. That's the minister designate for Attorney General. And did I hear him say he has seen that advice at that time?
No, at the time that he was speaking, what I heard, he said that the legal subcommittee was going to give them advice.
Right.
Subsequently, the advice came.
When was this ready?
This is dated 5th January. And it was 5th January, in the night of 5th January, that Parliament went to vary the thing. So I guess that when we communicated to them that our legal subcommittee tells us that they are not entitled to that facility.
Osafu Mafu
then
was
they went
speaking to the Super Morning Show after the 5th of January. So he would have known the contents of this advice and would have told Ghanaians that it had been rejected.
Yes, and I'm saying that it was on the basis of that rejection that they then went to Parliament to vary the Edubwando report in order to entitle them to
yes,
a house.
Honorable, tell us, why did Parliament do what it had to do?
First of all, let me correct an impression. It was not on the basis of the rejection. No rejection had been brought to the notice of Parliament. Bungalow committee is only a guide to Parliament. It's not a law unto itself. That is why the report is supposed to be presented to Parliament, especially the aspect that deals with the executive for approval. So it's only a guide. That must be very clear.
Please let us understand. You had dealt with that report already and approved it.
I am not aware of the Parliament dealing with that report already, because I have been in Parliament all through. When the matter came, Parliament said no. Indeed, the report had gone to make reference to General Hisi Committee and varied the entitlements of members of Parliament. That means members of Parliament which were received during the time of the COFO when the General Hisi Committee brought their report. And Parliament was of the considered view that you can vary their emoluments, entitlements to their disadvantage. And that was captured in the General Hisi report. That was also referred to in the EC Bundle Committee. So there was a fundamental problem because the EC Bundle Committee sought to vary to the disadvantage of members of Parliament, and also the executive, the entitlements that were due under Article 71. Okay, so the Parliament had to look at it. And Parliament, in looking at it, thought that the President should be given a residential facility. The Parliament did not pinpoint which residential facility. They said the incoming government. The President is entitled to a residential facility.
All right.
And so it is not consequent upon the opinion of a legal committee of the transition team that Parliament went to look at the report. I think that executive authority of state is vested in who? In the President. And anything that was happening was by on the basis of executive authority. Agreed? Executive authority is limited by law, so it must follow the law. The use of an exercise of executive authority follows the law.
You mean it was
Article
lawful?
294 or so of the Constitution defines executive committee to mean the authority with which government 295 operates. Now, when you read Article 295 together with Article 58 of the Constitution, you come to but one Constitution, that the President is government. Yeah. Okay, so when you say that no person, provided that person is dealing in accordance with law, you can't make that fundamental statement. You can't. The Parliament, so Parliament sat down and came to the conclusion that, look, this is how we should deal with it. So we dealt with it that way. And the President was the president then said, well, if that is the case, this is what I want to do with, or where I want to live. Fine. If that is not feasible, that is not permissible, so be it. So be it. That's why we have a new government. The new government has said, no, no, no.
Your claim of an agreement has been denied.
Yeah, no, well, it has been denied.
It's been rejected.
But even in the letter, they are talking about some discussions.
Yes.
So what informed those discussions?
He's asking why you didn't say agreement.
No, what informed, Osafo puts into brackets discussions between he himself and Deborah.
That Julius Deborah, rather,
yes,
putting into brackets.
Yes, well,
but you are suggesting that it was agreement between the presidents.
So let's backtrack. Why do you reference the discussions if the discussions had nothing to do with the residential facility or accommodation of the president?
The fundamental point is that you say that this was an agreement between the presidents, and the letter does not refer to a discussion between the presidents.
Because they were not privy. They are only privy to the discussions. That's why they are referring to it. How do you refer to something you're not privy to?
Let me bring Yaopong in here. What do you understand the advice by the Attorney General designate, as Hamid says, that they could not do anything because it was unlawful? How do you understand what it means by that? Is it a mere political game going on?
Interesting. Good morning. Well, I think that, well, first of all, what is the law that is contemplated here? And I must say that the resolution which Parliament passed, declaring that the incumbent president then, or the departing president, quote and unquote, was entitled to property, with all due respect, was unnecessary. Because there was already an act of Parliament which clearly states that where the incumbent president is desirous of occupying a state property other than those designated for the president and the vice president, he may occupy one. So that provision and Section 10 of the Presidential Transition Act clearly states that the incumbent president and the incumbent vice president shall each vacate the official residences before the date of the swearing in of the person elected as president. And if either of them so desires, move into an alternate official residence. This was the law that was passed by Parliament. It came into effect on 12 June 2012. So where was therefore the need for Parliament to even pass another resolution or an act of Parliament just to confirm an act of Parliament that was already in existence? So I think that, with all due respect, it was needless because the law already provides. And also, I think clearly your resolution did not confirm, correct me if I'm wrong, that the president was entitled to that particular premise.
He has said so.
Yes, so it means that it was still in conformity with this. So on 7th December, the resident designated for the vice president and the president should have been vacant. It should have been vacant on the morning of the 7th. I have a problem with that in the sense that on the morning of the 7th, I still hold that the president, the incumbent president, was president. And so why should you make a law to reduce the entitlement of a person who is an incumbent president? That is why even at the grounds, around 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, President Akufo-Addo was still referred to as the president-elect.
Yeah.
But it is because Parliament itself have created a vacuum, and the minority leader, Honorable Haruna, made reference to it. I think it's a Parliament that has brought all this seeming vacuum. Because you decided to have your first sitting when your term commences at dawn, 12 a.m. or so, midnight.
You are confirming what Hamid is talking about. You're saying that, number one, by the requirement of the law, the place ought to have been vacant. It was not vacant.
Yes, it ought to have been vacant, and you comply with the law first before you take advantage of other parts of the law. That's where it's coming into equity with clean hands maxim may apply, in my view. So you first comply with the law, move out, vacate, and then it appears that you don't even need actual permission to occupy another state property, although an implied permission may be necessary as to someone even going to show you a vacant residence other than the one designated for the vice president and the president. But another thing also, it also means that the president then was only entitled to one residence. That is the Flagstaff House. So for him to occupy two residences, one designated for the vice, in addition to the one designated for the president, in itself is contrary to law.
And the explanation is that President John Mahama remained in the bungalow designated for vice presidents when he became president. He didn't leave that place. And during that same time, where he ought to have been occupying for his residence as president, was also there and not being occupied, so to speak, or he was using both. Yes. That's what you're talking about. Yes,
that's what I'm talking about. So that is another kind of discussions that we might take up in terms of the law. So then another thing that may also have informed, I think is rather Miss, isn't it? Miss Gloria Kufu, was that the question is, at the time the so-called discussions took place, did now President Akufo-Addo have the capacity to bind the people of Ghana? He didn't, because he was not the president. He was not clothed with any capacity to make a determination as to how one of the state assets should be utilized.
Because the people had not given him their power yet.
Not yet.
It was on the 7th when he was sworn in.
That's right. Okay. Then again, my good friend Honorable speaks of some kind of agreement.
But that could be part of a transitional process, so it will be ratified after he is sworn in.
But two persons cannot contract out of law. I think that he was trying to say that as well. You cannot contract out of law and to ratify. I mean, it is said, if you read to foreign attorney general and so on, when a thing is unlawful, it cannot be lawful because other people say so. Does the law make it lawful or unlawful? That is the most important thing. Your act, however current, or a wrong, however it gains currency, doesn't make it a right or a law. So that is the point. So then the last thing is he speaks of an agreement. If I take that to be a contract, which I think in the circumstances of this case may not be far-fetched, you have the case of Medina Shopping Mall. All right? Let me just give you a full title. Now, Medina Shopping Mall Association versus Rose Hill Limited, E.M. Frimpong and Jimmy Nufu. Atuguba JSC, the Venerable, clearly stated that where there is a fundamental term to be agreed on by parties, there is no valid contract. Where the agreement is subject to subsequent negotiations, there is no valid contract. There is no valid agreement. So from the tone, talking about even a request or discussions, it means that either the discussions are clearly subject to finality by the conferment or the confirmation by another party, or that there are key covenants to be agreed on. And so in my view, whichever way you take it, one, there was no agreement. If there was, Anadu in particular, they didn't have the capacity to bind us, and therefore there was no binding contract. Then also under the State Property and Contract Act, such agreements must be in writing. To the extent that it was not also in writing, to the extent that there was already an existing law that says that you are entitled to property by an alternate property.
Perfect summary of your points that you've made. Now, Mr. Janto, see, what he's talking about, it does not sound more theory than the practice when you are going to, with due respect to you, does it not sound more theory than the practical situation of a transition?
Sami, the first question I'll ask you, and good morning to your viewers. And as Honorable Fuseni congratulated Nanado, I also take this opportunity to congratulate him. But Sami, the question I'll ask is that, are any of the eminent gentlemen i.e. President Mahama, President Nanado Kufuor, and Asante Hene, are any of them above the law? Are any of them above the law? If that discussion actually took place, there are two material laws that bind everybody in this country. The Constitution is one, and the laws that have been enacted in this country is another. There is a Presidential Transition Act. That act says something in 10. I don't want to repeat because my learned friend has already repeated that law. I would have expected, if that conversation actually took place, I would have expected the President Akufo-Addo to indicate to President Mahama that, yes, I hear your request, but we are dealing with laws. And the Parliamentary Transition, the Presidential Transition Act, Section 10, indicates that the outgoing president should leave his accommodation, is it a month? A month.
Before the day. No, before the day of the inauguration.
Before the day of the inauguration. So I'm afraid, if that is what you're requesting, we need to go by law.
So vacate.
Vacate.
And then the next day I take over and then I approve. Then you come back.
No.
What practicality is that?
No.
Are they not supposed to be acting in good faith in these things?
I do not think that bungalows and properties that have been designated for officials like president and vice president should be given out to anybody. They are designated buildings. Anyway, there's a law that states that whatever happens, any outgoing president should be given property.
He so desires.
Well, let's say that. We even put the so desires aside and let's say they should be given property. Let's take it to be given property. Isn't it incumbent on the government in power to make sure that that property is already constructed before all this happens? President Kufuor, sitting in his house, will sit back and say, President Mahama, you want the house. I am sitting here, I haven't got my entitlement. President Rawlings has got his entitlement. Where is the fairness in this? Where's the equity in this? Where's the equity? And so, really and truly, when you look at the letter, and I've got a letter here which says, John Dramani Mahama, official residence and office. The letter he wrote to
withdraw the interest.
To draw the interest. And he says, I refer to our agreement. What agreement? Where was that agreement held? Where is the document that states where that agreement is? And then when you go to the
Honorable Yunus saying it was oral.
Well, it could be oral, but it's an agreement. We don't know what that agreement is. I would have expected that John Mahama would come and President John Mahama would come and tell us, on such and such a day, we met here, we sat here, and this is what we discussed.
Nonetheless, if that was done, Yao refers to the law that in respect of such a property, you cannot have oral discussions or agreements.
You cannot have. And if I go to the last but one paragraph of President John Mahama's letter, he says, and I quote, "You will recall, Mr. President, that contrary to the erroneous impression created by some persons in government and the impression given to the former letter submitted on my behalf by Mr. Julius Debra, this was a follow-up to an agreement we had on my choice of accommodation and office." Where was this agreement done? Was Nanado, President Nanado, did he have the right to discuss this with President Mahama when there is a transition act that looks at all these things?
And I'd like us to, revert or actually come to the issue whether or not the anger and everything going on is about whether or not the ex-president should be housed by the state or they should not. What exactly are we talking about? But the two of you seem to bring up a new development. You say that by the tenor of Section 10 of the Transition Act, a retiring president, an outgoing president, has already been provided for as far as getting a new home to live in is concerned. And you are saying, since the law says that the president and the vice should vacate before the day of the inauguration. And it continues to say, if either of them so desires, move into an alternate official residence. Please, do I understand you to say this alternate residence provision simply means there's a home for you after your presidency, and that there's no need for what we have done over the period, set up a committee to determine what should be given to you?
Well, yes, that's quite interesting, because you see, the committee is established under the Constitution.
That's right.
And you and I know that when an act of parliament, for example, is inconsistent with a provision of the Constitution, say, becomes void to the extent of the inconsistency. Now, but the decision of the committee is not final. It is subject to approval, variation, and so on by Parliament. And if Parliament, in its wisdom, and Parliament is the master of their own procedure and proceedings, have decided that we will pass a law that will take care of this aspect of the remuneration, so that the recommendation by the committee will be subject to this existing law. So what it means is that since the recommendation is subject to approval by Parliament, the recommendation itself should take into account the prior established principle of law by the sovereign Parliament of Ghana. And so in that case, I would say that the committee itself may have erred, because they knew or ought to have known that there was already in existence an act of Parliament that says that where an outgoing president is desirous of being accommodated in a state property or residence, that person is entitled to it.
Okay.
So you cannot bring out a recommendation.
Yeah, I wanted it to be very
that
quick.
does not take cognizance
I wanted
of
it
that.
to be very quick. And for those of you who have the benefit of our television, what you're watching is we have our drone there, and it's showing you the house that is in question. That is number 3. Prestige,
like a
Prestige link. This is what we took earlier using the multimedia drones. Okay, so that's what you also understand is the law now. So there's no need for subsequent provision by way of a committee and parliamentary approval for a house for a president outgoing. Is that what you're saying?
For me, the key issue or the key point in this 10, that section, is so desires.
Right.
Yeah.
So desires. If the president so desires. So it's making provision for a president who came into office and didn't have his own accommodation. That is what it's making provision for.
So he should use the committee to express the desire.
Yes. So really and truly, for the stature of President Mahama, I think that he shouldn't have even gone there to start off with.
Why?
Why? Why? For his stature, are you saying that President Mahama came into office without having his own accommodation? Is that what we're saying? Is that really what we're saying?
We need to look at the form he filled.
Because
becoming president.
Yes, you see, and this is where I also indicate that form that indicates that
assets.
Declaration of assets.
Yes, I think that should be made public for everybody to see.
Yes.
When President Kufuor came into office, he decided he could have lived in the castle or he could live in Flagstaff House, but decided to live in his own house. After he came out of power, he went back to his own house. I haven't heard.
No, but there was a recommendation for him, which he was comfortable with, that he was going to get 2 homes.
Yes,
one in Accra and one at another location of his choice.
But I haven't heard him complain.
Even though President Mills varied that.
The most I've heard him talk about is his office. That's the most I've heard him talk about.
That's not the office he was provided.
Not his residency, his office in the initial period.
Okay.
So if I may chip in, it may help you.
Yes, quickly.
You see, in respect of President Rawlings, I think we need to distinguish it. Where President Rawlings is housed now was not an official residence for a president. He has been given an alternate resident,
Whatever
even
the
though
case.
at that time this law was not enforced.
Yeah, whatever.
So I think the argument has always been whether or not an outgoing president is entitled to a resident. He is, but I will also support it. That I think that it's about time that sometimes we look at what we are entitled to by law and ask ourselves whether it's even morally right to keep it. Because the rank and file will have terrible misunderstanding. They will think that you are not just being.
So you
doing
agree
the
with
right
him
thing.
that morally President Mahama should not be interested in being housed
Oh,
by
I
the
think
state?
so, because now there are information all over about various problems. You could avoid.
That he owns various properties?
Well, but the point is that
he was already known
I say the point
to be
is
well
that
to do
he
and could
I think
afford
he would have
all
been
of these
better
things
off
before
if
now.
he had not asked.
Now let's look at it this way. Let's look at it this way.
Let me just clear something.
Yes, I wanted you to take the question on as to whether or not we should keep the tradition and make it that it ought to be the case that an exiting president is entitled.
Well, it's an entitlement encapsulated in the Constitution. So if the president is minded to amend the Constitution, he can do that.
No, be specific. The Constitution doesn't say an
No,
outgoing
Constitution says
president
that
should be given a house.
No, it says emoluments.
Yes.
It's privileges. Can you have the Constitution?
Yes.
Entitlements shall not be varied to his advantage. Article 71.
And you are saying that includes 71, and you are saying that includes a
Determination
house.
on the salary, allowances payable to the facilities and privileges available.
And I hope.
Let him finish.
When you were
yeah.
talking, I kept quiet.
No, it's okay. Go on.
I'm just saying that it should cover everybody and not just one.
Please. Article 71(2). The salaries and allowances payable and the facilities available to the president, the vice president, and so on, the chairman and other, being expenditure charged on the consolidated fund shall be determined by Parliament. That's why Parliament has to determine it on the recommendation of a committee referred to. For the purposes of this article, except otherwise provided in this Constitution, salaries include allowances, facilities, privileges, and retiring benefits
or awards.
Now, so let me come back.
So once again, you are saying that the Prosabuando committee was wrong to suggest that he should get rent allowance instead of a house?
Well, I think that was why Parliament acted on it. I don't want this thing of going to say that they were no. I think that's Parliament read the report and thought that there was something fundamentally wrong with that recommendation, and Parliament acted on it.
Okay.
Now, first of all, let me come back. My good friend Yaopong has consistently said that the vice president and the president shall leave their designated, underlined, official residence. And he's fallen into a fallacy by thinking that where the president lives is the official designated residence of the officially designated residence of the president or the vice president. That's wrong.
Okay, so
that's wrong. The officially designated residence of a vice president is the government house, Australia House.
Since when?
Oh, that's the property in question that the president lives in belongs to the Cocoa Marketing Board.
Okay.
It is a property of Cocoa Marketing Board.
I can't live there as vice.
I can't live there. I can't live there as vice.
Aliyu
Mahama lives there as vice.
Mahama lives there as vice.
But you're a lawyer. You're a lawyer. The fact that vice presidents have lived in that property does not convert that property into an officially designated property.
But the Australia House you refer to, where will we find the official designation that is?
That is the government house, Australia House. That's a government house.
For the vice president.
It's a government house for the president or the vice president.
So that is also not designated either.
It's designated. It's designated. It's a designated
Where do
property.
I find it? Is there any Gazette notification to that effect?
So let's embark on that inquiry, but I know that is a government, that's the officially designated residence for the president.
Okay, so you are doing that by a presumption, and he's doing also that by a presumption,
There's no presumption
of the length of use of the other place.
The length of use does not automatically convert.
But that's what you have
property.
done.
No, I've not done that.
Or you are saying because that's a government property.
That's a government property for the
vice presidential property. Why?
Okay.
Because we are building a new vice presidential property because that particular property was in disuse.
Which one?
So this Australia House. So they started with the new residence of the vice president.
Who is they?
Government.
Which of the governments?
The NDC government.
Mahama.
When you knew that you had Australia House as a vice president's...
Why didn't you renovate?
Exactly.
Don't subject me to cross-examination.
But what do you say to those who say, you are saying Cocoa Board, this was for Cocoa Board, and Cocoa Board, who is Cocoa Board? Is that not the state?
Oh, I see. Cocoa Board is the state. Yes. Cocoa Board is
The
the
statutory
state. Yeah, Cocoa Board is the state. So Cocoa Board, I agree.
All right,
Cocoa Board is the
okay.
state. So just like if the president...
So we are paying rent to Cocoa Board for using that property.
Please. If the president decides to move into any property, any other property other than the designated property,
okay,
that property will be...
Thank you very much. What do you say about the moral question they raise, that this president should not even be interested in the first place? It shouldn't get to this point for him to now, because of the public anger, sort of come in to say, I don't like this bad backlash. So
that's why the law makes it quite clear that he's entitled to, if he desires. The choice is his. He has to elect. So if he elects not to move into a government property, that's his election.
Should he have elected so?
Well, that is a matter for him to consider. It depends on the personal idiosyncrasies of individuals.
What do you say? Should he?
No, I wouldn't be thinking for His Excellency John Dramani Mahama.
Okay.
I would have taken it if I were president.
All right.
Yeah, because it's an entitlement.
Some of the
and then,
okay.
Please, it's not about social democracy. Buzia lived in his property. Kufuor lived in his property. Nana Akufo-Addo, the president, might live in his property if he's minded to do so. But living in their property does not mean that the government does not pay for the rent.
Okay. Sammy, may I ask a question? Sammy, may I just ask a question?
Quickly.
Why was it that President Mahama knew that once he became president, he should move the official residence in Flagstaff House? Why did he then decide to still live in that house? Is that not a breach of the law?
There's no breach of the law here.
So what is it? Why would he continue to live there when he was supposed to go to Flagstaff House?
Here a portion was for some members of Council of State.
Yes.
It's not a breach of the law. And I believe that when Nana Akufo-Addo takes office and decides to live in the Flagstaff House, these matters might come up. The property as built by the Indians suffers serious structural defects. So there was the need to put them in shape. In fact, the president had indicated several time and again that he wanted to move into the Flagstaff House. But they needed to correct the...
Who is they?
This question of structural defects was spoken about in President Mills' time. And it's taking us how many? 8 years to have that fixed?
So I don't know what prevented the correction of the structural defects. That's why I'm saying that I don't know the extent of the structural defects. What I know is that the property itself was was leaking terribly, and even the Flagstaff House. But that Flagstaff House was, they were able to correct the leakages. But with the official residence of the president, I'm unable to tell the extent. The extent of the structural defects.
Okay.
So yes,
we are told that
Nana Akufo-Addo might want to
just briefly on. We are told that the president is vacating in accordance with the letter he wrote, withdrawing his interest, and he's moving into a new, accommodation that he has gotten for himself.
Yeah, the president has indicated that to us. He's moving.
Has he?
Yes, he's done that to us.
Has he moved?
Well, I don't know whether he's moved, but he's done. He said that he's going to move, and that
we understand by some reports that he's packing out.
Yes, he says that. He says that by when he gets to his new destination, he will let us know.
Where he held a meeting with you, we understand that is where he's going to live, and it's a new property for himself, is that it?
Well, I don't know where he's going to live. He says that when he gets to that destination, he will let us know. I don't know.
I see. But I was asking earlier that you said on the question of morality and everything else, if it were you, you would have picked it. But the question is about President Mahama. That's a moral question they raised.
Yeah.
I don't know the propriety of that, though. But you remember Gordon Brown? When it was due for him to take what he was duly entitled, he decided to waive it. We have examples of presidents who have taken such decisions,
and when it came
and
to
that's
Cameron,
the question they're asking.
When it came to Cameron, decided to waive part of it. Okay? In so many years, many years ago, American presidents were not entitled.
I was rather referring to Cameron.
Yeah, Cameroon. Many years ago, American presidents were not entitled to retiring benefits. And they lived in penury until the Congress decided that American presidents must go home with retirement benefits. Today, Americans are saying that these presidents have been, value has been added to them, and they get speaking engagements, and they write books, and they earn a lot of money. So Chavez, Jason.
They get a rent allowance, right?
Jason says that, look, we should cap the benefits, because they can't be getting all these benefits and then getting rent allowance from the taxpayers' money. So, yes, so it's an evolving thing. Probably what is happening now will inform future presidents on what actions to take. Whether to secure themselves while in government,
thank you,
or to wait until they are secured.
I don't know what you have to say about the question of morality here, and because if he says so, the question will be that then that will be same will be expected of Akufo-Addo, because he too is accomplished. It is not, as he says, it's not in government that you go to make money. So he should toe the line of David Cameron. He actually had to mortgage his family property to get extra money to be able to live where the new place where he wanted to live. He's referring to American presidents who were supposed to have just about $300,000 a year. $300,000 a year, and this is taxable. Our presidents don't even pay tax.
Yes, as I agree that former presidents must live in decency. That's the modest way in which I would put it. They must be minimally comfortable, and I don't think that from what I have seen of the arrangements that we have made for taking care of our former presidents, that those facilities and arrangements are necessarily opulent, nor are they, if you want, below the status. I think that they are just okay. The reason why this issue, if President Mahama had vacated his residence the way Vice President Emisa Atta did, this conversation would not be taking place. The reason why this conversation is taking place is because the former president elected to violate the law by continuing to live in his residence beyond the stipulated time allotted by the law. And therefore, this has arisen. Now, that is why it is also important that we live, or the president, vice presidents, etc., live in areas that are designated by law for them. Because if he was living inside the Jubilee House, there is no way he would have lived there beyond the 6. There is no way, absolutely
Will President Akufo-Addo live there?
I'm sure at a point in time he would go there. Are you following me? So if Akufo-Addo moves in there, and in whatever period of time he's supposed to leave office, there is no way he's going to say that, please give me time, I want to live here. It wouldn't have occurred. So that's the reason why I laid the premise of my arguments on the fact that it is important that even the law is guided by moral and ethical considerations. If those principles had guided the president, we would not be having this conversation, and everything would have been smooth. So I would urge that we do the right thing all of the time. Therefore, my honorable's argument that because Mr. Atta lived in Australia House, it had de facto become the residence for vice president.
No, I didn't say
of course.
That's not a logic.
What's the logic?
I said the vice president was living in I mean, on an officially designated government property.
Okay.
That was the logic.
All right, so
I'm not saying
go
that
back
because
there
it was
again.
certainly
Let's not go back there again, so that
we
we can end this discussion and move to the next level, take a break and come back. But this one, you just referred, like Nanado has been doing, President Akufo-Addo has been doing, that Jubilee House. Is the name changed? Throughout his campaign, he was saying Jubilee House.
We have never referred to it
as the Flagstaff House,
as by or any other name other than the name that the original builders of it intended for it. And the reason why President Kufuor named it Jubilee House was for good reason. One, it is an edifice that we built for ourselves in our Jubilee year, in our 50th year anniversary. That's significant. Number two, we said to ourselves that after 50 years of independence, it was not correct for us to continue to live in a slave edifice. Okay, so we said that let's leave that slave and colonial edifice and get an edifice that will define our independence as humans. Now you come into that new edifice and you call it Flagstaff House, which itself is a colonial imposition. Flagstaff houses are Commonwealth houses of our colonial masters and so on. So I didn't get the NDC logic, or perhaps they didn't understand that we built this edifice because we wanted to get away from the colonialism and the negativity associated with the slave
have you
custom.
changed the signage, everything there?
It will change soon. It will change soon.
How soon?
I don't know how soon, but sooner.
It will change.
Interesting.
Sami,
yes.
Two things.
Quickly.
The first thing is that this issue of Flagstaff House, there's history. There's history that follows it. And if it so happened that this new edifice was built on a completely different land, I would agree. But those coming after us, do they have any inkling? Will they have any inkling of the history of that building?
So you agree to the NDC changing it to
I agree to Flagstaff House because there is history.
All right.
Behind that. The original Flagstaff House
I want us to conclude
inside there. So if people want
very small point on the conclusion
that they can remember, it is still there.
And this is it. The Constitution Review Commission suggested a way forward to avoid all of these Article 71 brouhaha, to set up an emoluments commission that will be entitled, that will be vested with the power to do that. A president doesn't have to come into office and then set up a committee, do his own. Another president will come, like President Mills did, come and set up another President Ford did, and all of the problems that come with it. Do you think Nanado should pursue that route? I'm not sure he's bound by what the Constitution Review Commission did.
Yes, I think so, because you see, now the impression people are having, and please, Parliament may excuse me, I'm only reporting what I hear public. It's as if there is...
Report to the truth.
As if there is a process of scratch my back, let me scratch yours. So, by the end of the term, salaries, allowances are backdated. After it has been increased, we apply retrospectively, based on which then your emoluments will be determined. It went on, it was 2012? No, yes, 2012 to take effect from 2009. And it's happening again. And the same committee established by President to determine the salaries and emoluments of members of Parliament is the same committee that also determines that of the President. Now, I'm not saying it's anybody's fault. That is what the Constitution says. And therefore, any move that will at least take away this seeming, I wouldn't say perception, but it is, well, maybe a perception that is gaining currency. That because of that, that motivates either the executive or both the executive and Parliament to even amend or vary the recommendations of the committee.
Okay, thank you. So you like that to be done. Is Mr. President Akufo-Addo intent or interested in this? You know, he's been speaking about overhauling the Constitution for a long time now and contributed to the review process. Is he, you know, going to pursue this and ensure that we have one body doing this all the time?
Yeah. He really doesn't think that this is the way to go, I must tell you. He doesn't think that every 4 years, every president must set up a committee to look at their own emoluments. And he thinks that it's a very clumsy arrangement, I must say. So he's a lawyer, I am not. So once these are his thoughts, I want to believe that in the next 4 years, he will take the appropriate steps within the remit of the law to ensure that we have an arrangement that is permanent and that takes care of itself as the periods roll by.
Okay. Honorable Yusuf, what do you say about that? Because President Mahama had initially committed himself to that process and actually asked Labour to assist him to do away with Article 71.
Yes.
Article 71.
He was bound by Article, I think his attention was drawn to Article 71, which requires that upon assuming office, the president sets up a committee to determine the salaries, emoluments, and entitlements of Article 71 office holders. Now, what has happened? I had occasion to speak to this. This scratch my back and scratch your back thing came in as a result of the fact that the committee is normally established in the mid-term of the president, and they take more than a year to do their work. So,
and the approvals are always done
when Parliament dissolves. So that is what generates the confusion and the cloud of suspicion. So I suggested that one of the earliest acts of the president on assuming office is to set up this committee. Okay, and the committee having a free hand to determine the emolument, salary, and privileges of the Article 71 office holders early enough before the president even gets to the end of his term.
Your government spent almost $8 million to do a review process, which said that we should do away with this and do an independent emoluments commission. Your president, our president, was committed to that process, and then midway he forgot about it. You are saying that Akufo-Addo should also be interested in setting up a committee for himself rather than pursuing this.
No. First of all, I'm just talking about the existing law. The existing law requires the president to set up a committee. What you are suggesting is the recommendations of the Constitutional Review Commission.
What do we do with that?
So these are two different things.
What do we do with that?
No, these are two different things. So first of all, we answer to the existing law. If the president intends to comply with the existing law, my suggestion is that he sets up the committee early enough. If the president intends to go the way Mustafa Hamid has suggested, not honorable now, even though he's not been vetted, the president should take the process through the motions in Parliament and also to the people, so that we can have the amendment done. I mean, it's important that we amend the Constitution, but there are two different things.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Just before you end, I just wanted to make one quick point.
Okay, this will be like this.
Yes, I just wanted to make a quick point, and the quick point is that I hope we are not conveying to people that we are trying to say that these entitlements to president shouldn't be done. Because we have an example of President Liman, who nothing was given him, and he died in absolute poverty. And so I hope we are not taking that to the people. We are saying that it should be done and done in a way that satisfies everybody.
Okay, and I just also remember that the American system that he referred to, the American system, the salaries or the benefits doesn't get to be increased. That's one interesting thing about that. It doesn't get to be increased. Well, it's set against the dollar, so you can say that's a different thing.
Not against the cedi.
Thank you very much. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis show. We will take a break and return to continue the discussion with the president's appointees for office. 36 ministries. We'll be right back.